Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.blogspot.com. Welcome to the Reprehensibles. Welcome to the Unauthorized. Welcome to the VFM, to the Dread Ilk, and of course, to the Bears. This probably isn't going to be one for everybody tonight, but that's okay. We're going to do the book stream, although it's not really a proper book stream. You'll have to forgive me, my voice is a little shot. I've been not talking in a legal hearing for several hours. So tonight we're going to talk about Mere Christianity. And this is something that a lot of you have asked about. And I think it's a great topic for discussion, and it's a great little book to be familiar with and to know the details on. What we're doing here with the quizzes and so forth is that they're not there for grading purposes. They're not there for utilizing, testing your knowledge and so forth. They're there to help you understand the material better. When you go through the trouble of thinking about something, when you go through the trouble of articulating something, it fixates it much better in your mind than you would tend to imagine. And so, there's no need to worry about, getting it all right. That's not the point. And so what I hope that you'll get out of this over time, and one thing that I noticed in the past Voxiversities that we did, that's what we used to call it before the new Voxiversity on video got started. What I noticed is that a lot of people did the first quiz, maybe the second quiz, and then people would drop away. I think by the end, when we'd started with like 400 people, I think maybe 35, 40 people hardcore stuck through it to the end of Thucydides and the Peloponnesian War and through Dante's Inferno, which we also did. But the thing that's great about it was that people really came away with a strong knowledge of the material. In fact, a college professor friend of mine looked through it, and he said he was very surprised that he said the material was pretty similar to what you'd have at a decent university. And so anyhow, so that's the idea, is to get the information fixed in your head. That's why I encourage you to take the quiz. You can find it at voxday.blogspot.com. It's just a simple little quiz. We're going to do it right here. In fact, I'll give you the opportunity to answer some of these questions, and then we'll discuss them. So, question number 1. The contents of Mere Christianity were first presented where? A, on television. B, in the newspaper. C, on the radio. Or D, in a book. Go ahead, I'll give you a few seconds to think about it and answer it in your head. You don't need to answer it here in the comments or anything. And the answer is C, on the radio. And that's one of the reasons why Mere Christianity has such a breezy feel to it. It reads very, very easily. It reads almost like a conversation. And one of the interesting things that Lewis says is that in the first edition of it, he kept all the contractions because he wanted it to be accurate to the radio scripts. But what he realized is that didn't really work very well in terms of reading it. And so in the editions that we have now, unless any of you happen to have a first edition, it's now no longer in the contractions. So, question 2, which is not a name for one of the original 3 published parts of Mere Christianity. When Mere Christianity was first published in written form, it was actually published in 3 different parts. So which one of these is not the name of one of those parts? The 3 Faces of God, The Case for Christianity, Christian Behavior, or Beyond Personality. And it was a little surprising to me when you think about it that Beyond Personality was the name of one of these sections. You kind of wonder why he would have named a section that, and we will discover that, I'm sure, later in the book when we get to that point. 3 Faces of God is the incorrect answer. Obviously, it's just a meaningless one that I threw in there that sounded vaguely appropriate. Question 3. What 4 denominations does C.S. Lewis specifically say that you will not learn to become from reading the book? A. Anglican, Baptist, Eastern Orthodox, and Roman Catholic. B. Episcopalian, Evangelical, Lutheran, or Roman Catholic. No, I got it wrong, sorry. I started reading, I mixed them up. B. Anglican, Methodist, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic. C. Episcopalian, Evangelical, Lutheran, and Roman Catholic. Or D. Calvinist, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, Christian Science. The answer, of course, is the one that you would most expect an Englishman, the 4 denominations that were most significant to an Englishman of that time: Anglican, Methodist, Presbyterian, and Roman Catholic. The other stuff are just mixes that I threw in, including a rather silly one at D. So, in what sense, question 4, in what sense does C.S. Lewis use the word Christian? A. One whose soul is saved by grace. B. One who believes with his heart that Jesus Christ is Lord. C. One who accepts the common doctrines of Christianity. And D. One who has been baptized as an adult. And this is a bit of a tricky question, of course. It's very difficult to figure out if you haven't read the book at all, because all of them are potentially true. But the correct answer is C, which is one who accepts the common doctrines of Christianity. And this is a very significant question, and we'll get to it in a minute. We'll get to why it's significant, because that is further underlined by question 5. To what does C.S. Lewis liken his book? Sorry, somebody said, dropped out of middle school for a reason, I'm out of here. Hey, I warned you, this is not a stream for everyone tonight. To what does C.S. Lewis liken his book? A, to a home. B, to a room. C, to a church. Or D, to a hall. And what the correct answer is D, to a hall. And that's very important because it's directly related to the previous question, which is one who accepts the common doctrines of Christianity. What Lewis wanted to do here, and I really appreciated it, and to a certain extent, I would almost consider myself a mere Christianity Christian, which is exactly what Lewis did not intend. But what he wanted to do is he wanted to communicate with non-Christians what the core basis of Christianity is from his perspective. He says specifically that he doesn't want people to get caught up in the various divisions of doctrine. And I very much agree with him. I think it's incredibly unprofitable to discuss theological and doctrinal differences when with non-Christians, or even in front of non-Christians, because there is a strong tendency for people who are witnessing these discussions, which can obviously get incredibly intense, sometimes very oppositional and confrontational and ugly, and think that people are somehow fundamentally opposed. But that's not the case. Even if you've got Lutherans arguing over the efficacy of infant baptism versus Baptists who very strongly believe that you should not get baptized until you are able to do so meaningfully as an adult, both agree on many, many common doctrines. And so what he was attempting to do with Mere Christianity is boil it down to its common essence. And I think that he did a reasonably effective job in doing that. I think it was very influential on me. I think it was very influential on many, many people. Because I was very turned off and continue to be turned off by a lot of these pointless discussions that fundamentally resembled the philosophical debates over, the probably the apocryphal debates over how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. Who cares? It makes no difference to my life, to your life, to anyone else's life. And it's not profitable to ourselves. It's not profitable to others. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting into a debate or a discussion of matters that interest you. We have intense debates on the blog from time to time. You can look up, if you're interested sometime, you can look up the debate between myself and Team Calvin, because I am what they consider to be an open theist, and they are what I consider to be omniderigists. And so, we have very, very significant differences of opinion in terms of the way that we understand or imagine or perceive those processes that we can't possibly know. We have theories, we have ideas, we have perceptions, but we don't actually know. And Paul, for one, is very clear on that. The whole, now we see as though through a glass darkly. And it's very, very important to focus on the vital matters, which is the existence of evil, the necessity of the incarnation, the crucifixion and the resurrection, the willingness to humble yourself and repent of your sins and accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And those are the things that really matter. A lot of these other theological things, they exist for a reason. They help us understand. The instructions in the Bible help us. They help us live our Christian life more effectively. And so it's not that they're not important, but it's that they're not central. And that's what mere Christianity means. Mere Christianity means the simple core, the simple, ironically, the simple common core of Christianity. And so when we understand that, this is the stuff that a Roman Catholic has in common with a Eastern Orthodox, with a Baptist, with a Lutheran, etc., etc. And when you run into a so-called Christian church that doesn't abide by these doctrines, then you have serious reason to doubt the legitimacy of their Christianity. You have reason to doubt the reality of their spiritual identity. And so, this is what we're talking about with regards to churchianity and all of that sort of thing. And that's where you get into what is actually legitimately described as heresy. Christians like to. It's interesting that Christians don't really most Christians today don't really understand what heresy is. Heresy is not doctrinal differences. Heresy is that which rejects the core of Christianity. And so, that's where you need to draw the line. It's very important to draw the line. All the ideas of boiling Jesus down into some sort of Buddha figure or prophet or great moral teacher and so forth, those are fundamentally false. And so it's mere Christianity and a good understanding of it gives you a very good ability to draw that line that you need to draw. So let's talk a little bit more about the preface. One thing that I thought was really interesting here, and I think significant, is when he talks about the danger of allowing a word to be spiritualized. To use the term Christian in either a Dawkinsian sense, where he says, I'm a cultural Christian. There's no such thing as a cultural Christian. A cultural Christian is simply a non-Christian who likes Christian culture, who thinks well of it. But that's meaningless, as Lewis points out. Now, he wasn't talking about the use of the word Christian in that sense, because it wasn't, that wasn't really relevant in what was then a predominantly Christian society, rather than our modern post-Christian society. And so what we talk about, Stranger Danger points it out, when he uses the example of the term gentleman being redefined from an objective term to a subjective term, even though it's a positive term, it was a term of praise, but it fundamentally eliminated the meaning of the term. And that's why he very much opposes using the term Christian to mean a good person, or for it to be a term of praise. Baron von Metzgerstein says, where Christian means nice, civilized, polite, instead of agrees to core Orthodox doctrines. That's correct. And that's what we see in churchianity. Churchianity has spiritualized the word and negated the meaning. So I like the kind of people who consider themselves to be cultural Christians. I think for the most part, they tend to be good people. They value the kind of positive culture and society that Christianity helps bring about. And believe me, I've been reading Oman's History of England, and it's really remarkable how bad, how ugly, how dreadful the various pagan cultures, the various European pagan cultures were. Um, and so when you look at um, when you look at this, and Jilly Bear, stop talking about yourself. We're talking about a book club. We're not talking about your personal travails within the world of the fallen church. Um, anyhow, the important thing to understand is that Christianity means something. Christianity is a objective faith. It's a real thing with hard lines, and you need to stand firmly by that objective sense, or it will become as meaningless as the term gentleman. It was a little bit ironic, if you recall, the kid out in California who went around shooting a few people, referred to himself as the perfect gentleman. Think about how far the term gentleman has fallen to go from that one point to the other. Some of you have been commenting on Judeo-Christian, the term, the propaganda term, and you'll see there's nothing about that in here. Whatever Judeo-Christianity may be, and as I've said, you might as well refer to it as Luciferianity. But whatever you talk about it, or whatever you say about it, it is not in line with the common core of Christianity. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. He was the supreme gentleman. So, talk about gamma to the core. So anyhow, let's see. So that was one important point. This is a short. We've actually covered most of it because this is a fairly short preface. Let's talk about the hall. What he means by the hall is that he uses the rooms to mean the individual denominations with all their various doctrines. And he's saying that the book is like the hall. You can go from it into whatever denomination, whatever particular concept, what particular doctrinal concept of Christianity that you happen to prefer, that happens to call you, speak to you, that you perceive to be the most correct. And he's not judging. I mean, he said he's an Anglican, and his core beliefs and doctrines are found in the common prayer book of the Anglican Church. And so you start in the hall, and then you move into a specific room. I was raised in a Baptist church. I joined a Southern Baptist church later, but now I've returned, to essentially non-denominational Christianity. So to some extent, you could say, I'm in the hall. But the most important thing is that if you're in the hall, whether you're in one of the rooms, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you are within the church, the great web that connects all the brothers and the sisters of the faith together. And so Zach Log the Great says, the people who care about the specifics seem to be more honest, patient, and decent than those who just think of themselves as generic Christians. I don't find that to be the case. I've never found that to be the case. It is a little bit ironic that I do often find that some of the Calvinists with whom I have the most serious doctrinal issues are, in some cases, some of the best Christians that I know, just in terms of being decent, honest, God-fearing people. And so that's, for me, another reason why I think it's a mistake to get too hung up on doctrine and so forth, because, again, understanding is good, but obedience is what God requires. It's not about belief. Satan believes in God. The demons believe in God. There's plenty of very wicked, evil people who believe in God and hate him. What's the first and greatest commandment? To love God. And so it's not just about belief. It's about your relationship with God. It's about your relation, and as a Christian, it's about your relationship with Jesus Christ. And to me, that's the core focus. Vox, how can you say that Calvinists don't believe in free will? Because they don't. I understand how they dance around it. I understand the various distinctions of will that they make and so forth. And I'm not interested in having a Calvinist debate now. And please be aware that if you try to sidetrack any of these discussions into some sort of debate over the doctrines that separate one room from the other, I will shut you down very, very quickly. Trust me, the way that the two groups that always seem to want to try to get distractions and debates going, they're always either Mormons or Calvinists. I don't know what it is, but seem to attract that. Let's see here. Count Rhythm Bear. I like his comment. Calvinists here don't believe in free will. Yeah. See, those are the Calvinists I get along with. They're just they're not concerned at all about trying to convince anybody that their beliefs are palatable. They just say what they think. Vinny has a good question. Can someone act in a Christian manner yet not know anything of the Christian religion and still be considered a Christian? No. They are just a non-Christian acting in a Christian manner. Now, God does know our hearts, and so he may decide that the person is justified if he so chooses. We're not the judges. It's not for us to say. Although apparently we will judge certain things, which is a very interesting concept. But to the extent that we understand it, no, somebody who doesn't know Jesus Christ is not a Christian. But we also don't know that they're not going to be given the option later. Will we ever have another great awakening in the U.S.? I think there's a very good chance, but I think that it's more likely to happen in China and Japan. I think it's also very likely to happen in Russia. Ian Hunter Weissman says when Ben Shapiro uses Judeo-Christian, he uses the term to draw parallels between the two religions. No, he uses it to do far more than that. That's the exact opposite of an exaggeration. You're minimizing what he's actually doing there. Do you at least recognize the parallels regardless of his incorrect use of the term? No, I don't. There are no parallels. Judaism is the explicit rejection of Christianity. Judaism is much closer to Satanism than it is to Christianity. It is about the willful and knowing rejection of Jesus Christ. It's much worse than atheism or agnosticism. And one of the things that is so intrinsically blasphemous about it is that when you see the doctrine of the Jewish people being a light unto the nations, they are literally substituting themselves for Jesus Christ. Because in the Bible, Jesus Christ is described as a light unto the nations. And so the parallels that you're talking about are false. The fact that the fact that Jesus Christ came out of the not the Jewish people, but the people of Israel, that's significant, but it's irrelevant with regards to the larger picture. Is Islam closer to Christianity than Judaism? Yes, absolutely. It's still, it's still a rejection of Christ, a rejection of Jesus Christ, but it is a respectful rejection of it. Jilly Bear Lawson said, Shapiro stated recently, Jesus was a criminal, not even a prophet, and got what he deserved. Yeah, that's that's not even surprising. That's actually pretty tame. Am I wrong to point out that my husband isn't a Christian? I don't know. I don't know your husband. I've been struggling with the concept of not being the judge of someone's heart, given that the fact that fruit is required. No, I don't think you're. It depends how you're pointing it out. But what you should do is you should pray for him, and you should do your best to model Christian behavior for him. That's how it works. That's how people, bring people over to the truth. In fact, I think I took a note here. I was reading while I was working out today, and I ran into something I thought was pertinent. Actually, I need to save my place before I... let's see. So Oman here is talking about the reason that the kings of Wessex converted. And he had vowed that if the God of the Christians gave him victory and he should return in peace, he would be baptized. The campaign was successful, and Eadwine went joyfully to the baptismal font. It was long remembered how he held council with his witan, which is his council of elders, urging them to leave darkness for light and doubt for certainty. Then, because they had found little help in their ancient gods, and because the heathen faith gave them no good guidance for this life, and no good hope of a better life to come, the great men of Northumbria swore that they would follow their king. Coifi, the high priest, was the first to cast down his own idols and destroy the great temple of York, and with him the nobles and Gesiths of Eadwine went down to the water and were all baptized. So, the key thing there is that they didn't have hope. They didn't have the promise of anything better to come. And that is one of the integral virtues and appeals of Christianity. People ask me all the time, you see all these negative things coming. You see war, you see economic collapse, you see all of these problems. Why do you seem so relaxed about it? Why do you seem optimistic in general? And the answer is very simple. It's because I'm a Christian and my faith is in Jesus Christ. I can't solve these problems. And I'm brilliant. And I'm smart enough to know that there's not very many people smarter than me in the rest of the world. I can't solve these problems, and neither can they. We are literally hopeless in the face of the evil that rules the world. And selling out to him is no answer. I mean, if there's one thing you know about evil, it's that you're going to pay. And the price you pay is going to be worse than any reward that you were given. Ahab's Odyssey says, what's your opinion on the modern relevance of what Lewis calls the law of nature? Are we now in the country where 2 and 2 make 5? Absolutely we are. We're now in the country where 2 and 2 make purple. It's a dreadful place. He saw it coming too. Somebody said something about enemies and love. Lewis addresses that in this very preface, right at the end. When you have reached your own room, be kind to those who have chosen different doors and to those who are still in the hall. If they are wrong, they need your prayers all the more, and if they are your enemies, then you are under orders to pray for them. That is one of the rules common to the whole house. This is a great question. I was raised in an atheist family. I have never been to church, but would like to try a room out. Stupid question. Is there a protocol for approaching or attending? Absolutely not. In fact, if you go to a church and you say, I'm an atheist, I've never been in church before, can I come in? They will welcome you with open arms. I think you will be alarmed at how warmly you'll be greeted, because there is nothing and no one that Christians love better than people who are seekers after the truth. That's why people liked Roosh so much, even when he was still in his pickup artist days. Because you could see that he was a seeker after the truth, and I'm not surprised that he's become a Christian. I will not be surprised if Mike Cernovich and Stefan Molyneux eventually become Christians. You can see they are men to whom the truth calls. And the fact that they may not happen to have the gift of belief, the fact that they may find it hard to abandon their pride and to bend the knee, that's understandable. They're smart men, successful men with reason to be proud, and that's a very hard thing to conquer. I mean, I'm still famously arrogant, but I don't have any trouble humbling myself before the Creator. So Um, now the thing to keep in mind, just to be clear, to the atheist, to Dan, is that a lot of churches are converged these days, and so, I would recommend not choosing a church that has female pastors or that is very involved politically. You want to find a church that is focused on the faith, focused on the Bible. But at the same time, you don't, because it's new to you, you don't want to get into the concept of venue shopping and trying to judge them. But start reading the New Testament too, and don't be afraid to pray. Go ahead and ask God to show Himself to you. He will. I mean, I always tell people, be a little bit cautious about what you pray for. You just might get it. Anyhow, let me address some of the super chats here. Rudy Tailani says, I've been caught for months between Calvinism and Arminianism. When I read the Bible, God constantly urges people to make a choice. On the other hand, God is all-knowing and has to know our decisions before we make them. Ideas. Yeah, I think you're making a fundamental mistake. What I would urge you to do is go through the Bible and make a list of everything that God claims to know. And make a list of everything that God claims to not know or be surprised by. And what I think that you'll find is that what God claims to know everything about is very, very specific. And also, if God is outside of time, then He sees everything all at once. And so, knowing our decisions before we make them is not even a correct description of what is actually happening. So there are reasons to lean towards Calvinism. I don't think that the reasons that you are giving there are relevant. Slamrai Jamdown says, if the only churches in your area are liberal, is it worthwhile to attend or is it better to avoid? I tend to lean towards the better to avoid myself, but I don't, I can't say for certain that that's the right thing to do. I think probably the best thing to do is to, start a Bible study or something with some people in your area. The dog is doing pretty well, thank you. Rocky Mountain Bear says, Vox, love this book, thanks. Unrelated, but could ethical right be a better term to use versus alt-right? No, it's not rhetorical at all. I've started reading the Bible, and the Old Testament is kind of like reading about aliens. Is focusing on the New Testament now a problem? Not at all. I always recommend reading the New Testament. I never recommend, people who are seekers to read the Old Testament because that's the old covenant that's been replaced. It's not irrelevant, but it's not the core. Does prayer work in your experience? Define work. But yes, in general, yes. It's not magic. To use the Lewis term, Aslan is not a tame lion. God does not answer to us. But it can be remarkable. I've seen people who keep prayer journals, and it can be a little bit eerie to flip through somebody's prayer journal and see how many of their prayers were answered. But don't worry, I'm gonna get to all the other super chats in a minute here. I turned away from faith by my childhood Methodist pastor who would quote bell hooks during sermons. American Orthodox has been friendly so far, though. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of churches that do that. I mean, there's Greg Boyd, a pastor whom I very much respect, nearly destroyed his church when he suddenly came out and started talking, unexpectedly favorably about abortion. Which, I mean, I'd moved away years before, but that really, I just thought that was too bizarre for words. I don't even know where to begin with that one. So we'll get to the super chats. Okay. Califragilistic Bear says, if I feel there are gaps in my education, what would be good reading material to start with? The Collier Junior Classics. They will give you a much stronger base than you might think. Tree Bear says, Dear Vox, my girlfriend and I have had a couple of fights due to theology recently. I've been converting to Christianity. She's atheist agnostic. We're going to get married and have kids. Any advice? Again, model Christian behavior for her. Don't back down. Don't apologize. Be the leader. She'll follow you eventually. I mean, she'll either follow you or she'll leave. Silver Sleipnir says, thank you. You've motivated me to read more and hit the gym. Love what you do and God bless. That's great. I mean, I would like to think that, I've been a positive influence for some of you. And, two of the things that I like best to do are to read and hit the gym. And I actually usually do both at the same time. So, he says, love what you do and God bless. Thanks very much. Muffhead said, seems like if you know a cultural Christian, you tell them that you are commanded to love them and bring them to church. Keep showing these people love. I don't know whether you need to tell them that, but yes, you should show them. You shouldn't judge and reject them. You should recognize that they see some of the value in the faith and show them that there's more. John Doe says, Christ's followers become the chosen people in the New Testament, don't they? Yes, they do. I think many boomers get hung up on this point from the Old Testament to the New Testament in their analysis. Well, that's correct, but that's because they've been indoctrinated to believe otherwise. The reason that the Jews hate Jesus Christ is because their rejection of him is why God has rejected them. They are no longer the chosen people. And, the point that they always leave out is that the promise was conditional. And they broke the promise. So, one of the things Space Bunny was pointing out to me, she was reading some stuff and she was pointing out that each time God said, I'm done with you. You've broken the covenant, I'm done with you. And then the Jewish leader would say, oh, but don't give up on us. Think about what that people would conclude about your power and stuff. Well, that was fine right up to the point that they rejected his son. Ozzy Owlis says, thanks for the stream. Well, thanks for tuning in. Unlike about half the normal crowd, who clearly have no interest in discussing this book, which is fine, which is totally fine. I'm just mildly amused. Talk about Game of Thrones. People are happy to jump on and talk about how much they dislike it, but you talk about a great C.S. Lewis book, and they're like, I don't want anything of that. I don't want anything of that. Sam Jem says, are the new Cambridge histories safe from political bias? Absolutely not. I wouldn't get them. Rudy Taliani said, we talked about that, Calvinism and Arminianism. First of all, what most people say is Arminianism is not Arminianism. People have repeatedly accused me of being Arminian, and it's or maybe it was another one that was. Anyhow, it's often misapplied, especially by Calvinists. Um, have you read Richard Baxter? No, I have not. And this is why dogma is so important. It never changes, and you can tell right away who's a fake Christian. Um, well, I think at least you can tell who is a fake denominational member who doesn't belong in the room, and that will often correctly indicate that they're not a Christian at all. Huh. I did not come up with my favorite gospel hymn, to be honest, but I will. I just honestly haven't given the matter any thought. All right, so that covers it. Frank Underwood says, I can't picture successfully reading while doing cardio. How do you do that, Vox? I bike on the recumbent bike. It's great for reading. Or playing video games if you set it up correctly. I used to have my exercise bike set up with a 3 meter by 5 meter projector. So it's an awesome way to play Maddens. The reading for the next one is Book 1, chapters 1, 2, and 3. So what we're going to cover is right and wrong as a clue to the meaning of the universe. And the 3 sections are the law of human nature, some objections, and the reality of the law. It's not too bad. In this book, that means it's a total of 13 pages. So none of you should have any trouble knocking that off. As before, I will put up a quiz on the blog, and thanks for taking part in this. I hope you found it useful. And that was just the preface, so we're going to be diving in more in earnest with the next session. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.